there was a time that was pre-river runs through it. And then there was a time that was post-river runs through it. The pre-river runs through it, that was a completely different feeling. Everything was different about fly fishing then.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your host, Angie Scott and Barb Carey.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast. I'm Angie Scott. I'm super stoked about our episode today. I recently had the chance to travel over to Chattanooga to visit the Waypoint TV studios and interview the amazingly inspirational Captain Tom Rowland. Chattanooga is his hometown, so it was extra special to be there. While I was there, he interviewed me for his show as well, so if you missed that, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. You probably know Tom from his hit shows such as Saltwater Experience, Into the Blue, and Sweetwater. He also has an awesome podcast himself, as I mentioned, called the Tom Rowland Podcast, and it's all part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. We talk about his hometown, fly fishing, the importance of physical fitness and sleep, and much more. So, speaking of physical fitness, Tom issued a challenge to all his podcast listeners back in January, and I'm going to issue the same challenge to you all. It's super simple yet highly effective, and here it is. It's called the 2020 Challenge, and all you have to do is exercise for 20 minutes every day for 20 days in a row, and that's it. It could be walking, cycling, swimming, going to the gym, doing yoga, or any combination of any kind of physical activity for 20 minutes a day. I'm taking this challenge and I hope you do too. Let's see what happens in just 20 days. My motivation is to get ready for spring and summer boating and fishing season. I'm going to be focusing a lot on core work so I can more easily withstand fishing tournaments 8 hours a day and not be straining my back as much. What's your motivation? Shoot me an email at angie@thewomanangler.com. Let's support each other. We can do this. All right, here's my conversation with the one and only Captain Tom Rowland. Well, Tom Rowland, welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast.
Thank you.
It's not often we have guys on the show, so feel pretty special.
I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, well, we've had L. Lindner on, which was pretty cool. He's
legend.
A big legend, yeah. Especially I grew up in Minnesota, so to me to have L. Lindner on was really cool because we grew up watching his shows every weekend.
Me too.
And stuff. So
I always liked his format. Back in the Inn Fisherman days, when he was there, they had that format that was like 3 different things, and it would be like spring bass fishing, and then they'd have like the last, first ice out on northern pike fishing, and then they would have like smallmouth fishing somewhere else, and they'd have different personalities doing it. I always thought that was fantastic format for a TV show.
Yeah, well, they know what they're doing in the business, that's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're here in Chattanooga, which is pretty cool. It's actually your hometown, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I know we'll get into your story a little bit, but are you back here now, or what's?
Yeah, for the most part. We had I don't want to get ahead of the story, but there was a hurricane in Florida, Hurricane Wilma, and we were living in Key West, and Hurricane Wilma put 4.5 feet of seawater in our house and sent us on kind of about a year and a half rebuilding of the house and kind of rebuilding of Key West and rebuilding of our lives and everyone else's lives down there, as hurricanes generally do. And it just seemed like there weren't going to be schools for the kids. So we have 3 kids. And so I thought at the time that I would bring the family up here because it was the safest, get them in school up here. It was going to be a temporary kind of thing. And I would go back and continue guiding and go back and forth. But it worked out nicely because we started, Saltwater Experience was doing pretty well. Then we started Into the Blue. Then we started Sweetwater after that. And I couldn't have done that guiding every day. Like there's just too many phone calls, too many things you got to do to be guiding full time, pretty much out of cell range all the time. So it worked out, but I still spend a tremendous amount of time in Florida. But Chattanooga's a good place for me.
Yeah. What was it like growing up here?
It was nothing like it is today. Chattanooga's a nice place today. It's a very nice place. And when I graduated high school, I was very certain that I would never come back here. If you look around today, there are parks, green space. There's a 15-mile river walk on the river. We've had a series of good mayors that have really embraced what Chattanooga has in its natural resources, like the river in particular. When I grew up here, the river was hidden. It was an embarrassment almost. And the banks were covered with kudzu. You couldn't see it. They didn't want you to see it because it seemed dirty. There was a lot of industry here. We had steel mills. It was dirty. They called Chattanooga the armpit of the South. Oh, wow. And it pretty much was, because you had the rail cars coming in, and it was a good place for steel. And you can still see how, as you come in from Nashville, where you came in this morning, the old abandoned steel plant that was just over on the right, and there's some good fishing on the other side. But right there, you can see how the railroad tracks come in, and there was all that steel stuff there. It was just real dirty, and people embraced the industrial kind of geographic location of Chattanooga, and they didn't embrace the abundance of natural resources. It was totally an afterthought. We had a mayor, Bob Corker was one of the first ones. He's a U.S. Senator now, or just he was. And he was really one of the early mayors to really embrace, like, we need to turn this thing around. And it started with the Tennessee Aquarium. And the Tennessee Aquarium really planted a seed that ended up changing the whole town, because just across the river from where we're sitting, there was a walking bridge. There is a walking bridge now, the Walnut Street Bridge. It was abandoned and dilapidated for a long time. They thought about blowing it up. I mean, there was time when I don't know if it's real or not, but the urban myth was that Hollywood wanted to pay to blow it up, for a movie scene or whatever, and they were just going to blow it up. Anyway, somehow it held on. They refurbished it and created a walking path back and forth between the two sides of the river. That was the first connection between one side and the other. And otherwise, it was almost like two different towns. It took many years for people to kind of use that, and then many years for one side to start developing. And then the aquarium, we had a lot of tourism there, and then you'd see a couple of restaurants spring up, and then it just slowly spread across both sides of town, and it just got nicer and nicer. And then you'd see another park pop up and another park pop up, and the river started to clean up, and it just became a much nicer place. And my wife and I, when we were in Key West, we would come back with the kids and, wow, this is pretty nice. Like, let's just go to that park, or let's go to that park, or let's take the kids over here or there. And so it was always kind of a little seed planted in our head that maybe one day that might be a good place. But I mean, I was fishing all the time, so it didn't seem like a natural thing or even a possibility. But nature has a way of doing things like that for you.
Wow, yeah, I didn't realize that. I moved to Nashville 20 years ago, and the first time I came to Chattanooga with some friends just to go to all the different tourist stops, Lookout Mountain, and see Rock City and all that stuff, I wouldn't have never imagined Chattanooga was like that back then.
Yeah, it wasn't very nice, but if you've never been to the Tennessee Aquarium, you would really like it. I mean, you could spend 2 days in there for sure, but a full day, no problem.
I have not done that yet.
So, you should go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's only a 2-hour drive from Nashville, so.
Right. And they have a freshwater, the aquarium started with a freshwater building, and it was, I think, probably a wise move, because they many people had a freshwater aquarium, and this is before Atlanta had their aquarium. And so they came in with like the world's best freshwater aquarium, and it's got some amazing, exhibits in there, like an Amazon exhibit. They got an arapaima in there that's probably close to 9 feet long. I mean, it's incredible. It's this big around. That's a fish that's probably number one on my list. I would love to catch that fish. But they have, like the Amazon River, they have these exhibits where the Amazon flows, from, into bigger rivers and bigger rivers and bigger rivers and eventually into the Amazon River. And then the whole thing starts. It's pretty cool how they do it, but you take an escalator all the way up to the top, and it's like you're on top of a mountain, and there's a trout stream there. And then that trout stream kind of goes into the Tennessee River and then into Nickajack Lake, and then the Nickajack Lake goes into the Mississippi River, and then there's exhibits for each one of these. And then the Mississippi River eventually dumps into the ocean. And so that's where you have like one big saltwater tank and all the different fish that would live at the mouth of the Mississippi, which is every fish in my experience. But it's just a cool way that they do it. And then they expanded it and they put a saltwater building, a whole standalone building there. And they have these traveling exhibits that'll come in, and, they might have a jellyfish exhibit or a seahorse exhibit or whatever. And that may stay there for a couple months. And then I guess that goes to a different aquarium and they move those around. So it's, every time you go in there, it's a different experience.
Oh, cool. You just gave me an idea. We need to do an episode about the Chattanooga aquarium.
There are, that's one that's been on my list too, because there's the caretakers in there. Mm-hmm. They know a lot about all those fish, and then I can't even imagine what the inner workings of that place looks like. I've had a 55-gallon aquarium, and it was hard to maintain and keep clean, and that place is impeccably clean, and I don't know what the filtration must look like a building, because they've got so much water in there. Wow. It's unbelievable.
Well, I'm glad I'm not in charge of all that. So you mentioned Nickajack. There's a lot of really great fishing resources around here, and actually my first bass tournament last year was on Nickajack, and we took first place, which was awesome. I got lucky, paired up with a really talented angler. But what you grew up fishing with your dad around here? What kind of places did you fish?
We liked small ponds more than big lakes. Like he had a boat. It was a duck hunting boat, but we never really fished out of that. We'd fish out of canoes. We'd fish out of small boats with a little electric motor. He had some friends that might have a pond on a piece of property or something. And we would go to smaller lakes and just fish for bass and bluegill and occasionally catfish, but mostly it was bass and bluegill. And my dad loved to fish for bluegill. He just loved that, like with everything, crickets, whatever, like lures, anything. He just loved that bluegill fishing, and he still does today. But yeah, that was pretty much it. And he took me trout fishing maybe twice, and it took hold pretty well. I mean, I still remember both of those trips. And then later, I just kind of got this desire that's just what I wanted to do. I don't even really know where it came from. It's just one day when I was about a junior in high school, that was just kind of what I wanted to do. And so that led me down a path of actually figuring out how to do it.
Right. So trout fishing, back then, did you do fly fishing? Mm-mm. It was just all...
No, I didn't know anyone who fly fished. I had never seen someone cast a fly rod, and I saw an old fly rod in my grandfather's closet that he used on the lake when the willow flies would come out. He would I never saw him try it, but it was in there. It had an automatic reel on it, and I remember trying it one day on the dock, and it was bad, really bad. But I didn't really start fly fishing until I got a job in Yellowstone National Park, and I knew that's the kind of fishing they did out there. I started reading a lot of articles and stuff, and I just taught myself, and it was bad. And I would suggest people get instruction, but right. Back then there was no instruction. We didn't have a fly shop around here. We didn't have, fly shops were just not something that you had, even in the South. Mm-hmm. They just weren't just wasn't something that anybody really did. So if you wanted to do it, you just kind of had to do it. So I went to Kmart. There were still Kmarts around, and I bought a Browning rod combo. It had a Martin single action reel and a level line, and I can still remember it was a 2-piece fly rod. And, they kind of hang up on the display, and the fly rods are the real dusty ones that nobody ever touched. And I just kind of looked at that, and I think it was $50. And I was like, I think I want to buy that. And I bought it and just started messing around with it. And, wasn't long after that I got a little bit better one, but that's how I started, man. Just casting in the backyard.
Mm. I've spent a lot of time with fly anglers lately. I haven't really gotten too much into it myself. I had an opportunity to do what was called the Redfish Roadie road trip with Jen Ripple from Dunn Magazine and Heather Hodson, who started United Women on the Fly. And they've 2 years in a row now have done this big fly fishing road trip, and they have different destinations and get together with different groups of women mostly. And, this part of this trip, they had fly casting challenges, and then this was all down in Florida and then ended in Louisiana. Oh. But I have mad respect for fly anglers. I mean, just watching them, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But, I think some fly anglers like to make it more difficult than it really is. It's really not that difficult. If you just, for me, if I had gotten some good instruction in the beginning, I would have been miles ahead of where I was years later. I just had to fight through it myself. But today, you can get a casting lesson and you'll be casting. Plus the rods are so much better. The cheapest rod on the market right now is better than the most expensive rod on the market 20 years ago. You could literally walk into Walmart probably and get a better rod than most people started with that have been fishing for a long time. Much less go into a Bass Pro Shop so you get a really good rod. And so that makes a big difference, to make sure that the line's the same as the rod, because the line I started with probably wasn't matched to the rod. It makes it difficult, but now it's so much easier, and just a little bit of instructional, you'd be great in a couple of hours probably.
Now, when you first got into it, one of the things we talked about on our trip was how fly fishing has kind of over the years had this sort of elitism component to it. Did it feel that way back then, or was it pretty inclusive?
Yes, and no. So when I started, there was a time that was pre-River Runs Through It. And then there was a time that was post-River Runs Through It. The pre-River Runs Through It, that was a completely different feeling. Everything was different about fly fishing then. It was those were the people that were in the know. It seemed a little more underground. In a lot of ways, it seemed a little more elitist. And then you have a River Runs Through It came out, and Brad Pitt's fly fishing in a river. It made everyone in America want to try it. And I was working out of the Orvis store in Jackson Hole, which that was I guess, the magnet. Even though that's not where the movie was filmed, Jackson Hole's a place of great tourism. And man, they came by more than we could handle. And we had 6 guides before River Runs Through It. We had 27 guides the next year. Wow. Everyone working more than those 6 guides were working the year before. It was just an influx. So then there was a little bit more of a kind of an elitism, it's better than regular fishing. I don't know. That's the one thing about fly fishing that I don't really like or embrace. I don't think it's better than regular fishing at all. I think that a fly rod is a tool, just like a golf club in a bag. It's your wedge, and you've got a driver, and you've got a 5-iron, you've got a 7-iron, and every different rod, your bait caster, your spinning rod, your fly rod, in what I do, you need all of them. And I don't like I don't like the elitism, like one's better than the other, because it's really not. It's just a matter of which do you choose to, practice more. And that's the one you're going to get better at. And fly fishermen are practicers. They really are. Bait casters are practicers. The spin fishermen are the ones that I don't see practicing as much. But I mean, you see bass fishermen throwing it into a coffee can 100 times, right? And fly fishermen are a lot the same. You can pick the line up and put it down, pick it up, and you can do it in your yard. So they're practicers, and you got to respect that they're practicing their craft, and they're proud of what they can do with the rod. But you should be doing that with all of them, I think, trying to get the best you can. But I don't know. I just think there are situations where I really enjoy fly fishing, and there are situations where I really don't. Like it's going to be so much more effective to do something else. And then there are other situations where it's going to be more effective, but you enjoy this type of fishing so much that you choose to go with the least effective. But you got to know that's what you're doing.
Right.
It's not because it's better. It's because you enjoy it more, or I enjoy it more, I should say.
Yeah, that was really the dynamic that we felt on the trip, because everyone I was with was fly fishing, and then I was using conventional spinning gear, and we were doing sight fishing in the flats, and we fished the Everglades and the mangroves and all that. But it seemed like overall I was having more success catching fish.
Yeah. I'm sure you were.
And I'm watching them, and it seemed like they're just working so hard, but that's what they love, know. And
now, before a river runs through it, there were very few people that went fishing for their first time, and it was fly fishing. Very few people. I would say almost everyone started, like fishing with worms, or crickets, maybe trying some different kind of fishing, and then making their way up to fly fishing. Like, I've caught enough, and in saltwater, you bait fish for tarpon or whatever. You catch 50 tarpon on bait, and then you finally say, you know what? I know they're going to eat that. I want to try something else. Maybe then you start throwing lures at them, and then instead of catching 50, you catch 5. And then, maybe you get good at it, and you find different situations, and now you can catch a bunch of them on lures. And then it's like, oh, there's this other thing, fly fishing. That seems even more difficult. So I'm going to choose to go and do that. So that's how the anglers were kind of before a river runs through it. Almost everyone had this stair-stepping kind of history in fishing of working their way up. Now you have a lot of people that just jump right into fly fishing and think that it's the best, and they have no other experience. So the other person that has worked their way up and thinks that fly fishing is the best and the most elite way, okay, good. That's your opinion, and you have all this other experience to draw from. And good, I respect that if that's what you think. But somebody that just jumps in and starts fly fishing and hasn't tried all of these other things and then has an elitist attitude, that's what I have a problem with.
Right.
Like, how do you know? Like, how do you know that it's better than something else when you've never tried these other things?
Right. Well, you had the opportunity to go to guide school, which it's still around. I just saw an article about, and not the guide school you went to per se, but there was an article that came out recently about the advantages of going to guide school even if you don't want to be a guide. Talk a little bit about what that is and what you learned.
Well, when I started, there was one guide school that I know of. I think it was the only one. But it wasn't maybe, well, I guess the idea was that this particular outfitter was going to run a guide school, and maybe he might find somebody that was pretty good and hire them. So it was an opportunity to kind of keep the guides busy in the early season when there were very few trips around. They could bring in these students that it wasn't about catching fish. It was about learning how to row a boat. It was a genius idea. It really was. And that year, I think I was the only one hired out of my guide school. A couple of other people went to other ranches and other outfits, but there were people even back then that had no intention of guiding. They just thought, hey, I'll learn how to row a boat. Maybe I can get my own boat. This will be a great opportunity to learn a whole bunch of things about fishing. And it was a great program. Then following up on the next year after River Runs Through It came out, and this particular outfitter, Joe Bressler, needed the number of guides that he did. I mean, he hired almost everyone out of the guide school, and they were already, trained up enough to where they weren't going to kill anybody. And, they kind of had an idea of the culture at this outfit, and they had an idea of how to treat a customer, and, and most of the people that were coming, they had never been on a trip before. So it was perfect. And then over the years, he just continued to get these people, these high end people, and have those people work for him, because he had the pick of the litter, and he would just see who did the best, and he would just hire those people right out of the guide school. And so that was fantastic for him, and really a genius move. But I really enjoyed the guide school. I would have had no other way to get started in the fishing industry, and it was really probably fortuitous that I went when I did, and not after the movie came out, because I started at the very bottom. And probably the next year, I probably would have just started as a guide right away. But I started as what they called the swamper. And the swamper basically changed all the bearings in the trailers, did whatever needed to be done. But the main job was to ferry firewood down a 27-mile canyon to the permanent camp that we had there, or the summer camp that we had there, and take all the tents, the cooking supplies, everything. I wasn't the cook, but I would just take all the stuff down there. And then after I dropped it off, then I could fish my way out. And that was pretty good. That was fun. But starting at the very bottom like that was really good for me, because I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't grow up in an outfitting family. I had been on one guided trip before I had ever even been out there. So I was green as green could be. And that was very good for me to start like that at the bottom and get some education about what it is, what it means to be a guide, what that even is, and how you treat a customer. And a lot of people don't, they don't know that. And that's, I think, maybe one of the most important parts of the whole business is customer satisfaction.
Totally. Yeah. It's, those are all things you need to learn, the wheel bearings on a trailer. I mean,
Yeah.
You don't want to be going down the road and lose a wheel.
Right. And I didn't know any of them.
Yeah. So that's really cool. It's so crazy how Hollywood and different things come out can totally change the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was in Nashville when Oh Brother, Where Art Thou came out, and all of a sudden bluegrass music was the biggest thing. And the booking agency I worked for all of a sudden was signing these like Ralph Stanley and stuff like that, and they were making good money. It was crazy.
That was a great movie.
Yeah,
I still like that soundtrack so much. It was really a great movie.
Yeah, got me into bluegrass.
Yeah.
So it worked.
And it's still stuck around. Like, all it needed was a little kickstart. Now we have bluegrass festivals here and all over the place.
Have you ever been to the one that's in the cave?
No, I've not been to the bluegrass one, but we just went there with the kids. Both my boys were in from Montana State, and my whole family went to Moon Taxi at the cave. And Moon Taxi, I like them. They're pretty good, but live they were fantastic. And then you put them in that cave environment, which I didn't know what I was getting into. Like, I thought, okay, it's a cave, I mean, I've been to Sequoia Caverns and Cumberland Caverns and all of that, but I didn't know what it was going to be like. But they have really done a tremendous amount of work on that. Like, they've concreted the floor. It's perfect. Yeah. I mean, it's a really nice environment to see a show. And I went away from that thinking I'm going to get the schedule and start booking tickets for anytime I see anybody that I might like to see, because it was such a good show.
And they sell out all the time.
Yeah.
So I need to put that on my bucket list.
Yeah. It's really nice. I mean, they run a good thing. I mean, it's really it's out in the middle of nowhere, but they've got it really nice to where, I thought it was going to be muddy. Like I've been in caves before. So I had in my truck, I had my turkey hunting boots and I had stuff for the kids. And then we got in there and I was like, oh, this is like really nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a floor like we have right here. Like, it wasn't anything like I thought it might be.
Yeah. Well, speaking of where we are right here, we're actually at the Waypoint TV offices in Chattanooga, and we're all part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective, the podcast network, which is really awesome. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we moved on.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to be here, and pretty cool that it's not too far for me.
I know. Waypoint is doing some really cool things.
Yeah.
And there's a great team here.
Yeah. We've talked about the app, quite a bit on the show,
Okay.
and how easy it is. And I don't know if you've heard my personal story, but
No, that's next.
yeah. Well, yeah.
When you're on my podcast.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, everybody on here has heard my personal story, so we'll share it on yours.
Good.
That'd be great. But before we wrap this up, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because on our show, we talk a lot about how fishing is the great equalizer, especially, there's all these high school teams and people that aren't as competitive athletes to play, football or basketball or whatever. They can join these fishing teams and kind of be on an equal playing field, and so it's becoming an attractive sport for high schoolers and college students to get into as more and more schools start developing programs. But at the same time, I've found it's really helpful, especially if you're doing tournament angling and you're fishing an 8-hour day. It wears on your body, and I think to some degree you need to focus on fitness.
For sure.
And I know that that's a big part of your life and has really helped you through guiding. And we also have a lot of female listeners who are going through some health struggles. Some tournament anglers, I know one just got diagnosed with MS, and she's trying to work up the stamina so she can start tournament fishing again. A lot of ladies battle breast cancer, and fishing's the only thing that that gives them hope and keeps them going and stuff like that. So I just wanted to touch on physical fitness a little bit with you. And do you have any fishing specific type tips or advice?
Yeah. Well, I would say that my path to physical fitness basically is all about fishing. Because when I was a guide out in Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana, I rowed a boat all day long. You're pulling the anchor, you're rowing the boat, you're putting it on and off the trailer, you're pulling it up on a gravel bar. It's very physical. So even as a young person, that was the first back injury I had when I was a guide out there. I didn't even know what a back injury was, and all of a sudden I can barely walk. And first time I ever went to a chiropractor, and so that was kind of an eye opener. And then in Florida, as a flats guide, you're pulling a boat all day long, and so pulling a boat's kind of like climbing a rope all day. And for whatever reason, the fish like to be directly into the wind. I don't know why they choose to be there, but that means that you have to pull directly into the wind, and it's not easy. And when you're first getting started, a lot of times you have two customers. When you're more seasoned guide, you have the people that choose to fish with you by themselves, so that lightens the boat considerably. But in the beginning, man, I mean, you're pushing, and later, as you become more established, then you start getting a nicer boat, which is lighter and all that stuff. In the beginning, I had this big, giant boat, usually two customers, sometimes three. You're pushing it around. It became very, very obvious to me that, especially as it became time to have kids, that the amount of money that I was going to make guiding was a perfect, in perfect proportion to my physical fitness and how many days I could go in a row. And I wasn't taking very good care of myself when I first started guiding. I didn't know how. I didn't drink enough water out there. I wasn't staying in very good shape. I was eating crappy food, and I would go maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days in a row, and I'd be exhausted, so exhausted I'd need to take a couple of days off. And then I'd go again for 4 or 5 days. And I could see some of these older guys, and I was like, man, he's gone like every day for 30 days or whatever. So I just kind of got it into my head that if I was in better shape, I could go more days. I could be more attentive to my anglers. I could have a better attitude, and all of those things happened. I could, and physical fitness wasn't just, lifting weights and all of that. Physical fitness was making sure that I drank enough water. That was a big one. Making sure my electrolyte levels were good, because if especially in Florida where you're drinking a ton of water, but you're sweating it all out and you're working really hard and it's 90 degrees and super humid. If you're not replacing your electrolytes, you're just slowly depleting your electrolytes through the week, and then you do get super exhausted. And so I learned how to monitor my electrolyte levels and make sure I was drinking enough water. Started eating better food, and then I started realizing that I was getting some overuse injuries, like from poling the boat. I started having problems with my shoulders. I couldn't reach up anymore, and I had orthopedic surgeons telling me that this is your box now. This is where you work. You shouldn't be reaching up any higher than this. You shouldn't really be trying to do anything down here. This is your box. This is where you should drive your car. This is, you shouldn't have one arm on the steering wheel like this. And I was like, that I just cannot accept that is my future, that I'm supposed to work in this box right here because I'm supposed to be pulling a boat, right?
At a pretty young age.
Right. Yeah. But I was having these shoulder injuries and everything like that. So I just started looking into, really educating myself on what real physical fitness was. And it became a 1-to-1 ratio. The better shape I was in, the more flexible I was, the stronger I was, the more I was maintaining my diet and hydration levels, the more I could work. And when I was out there working, I was better. I was nice. I was patient. I thought I was funny. Maybe my clients thought I was funny too. I don't know, but it just became this ratio, and then it became a habit. And today it is, I couldn't imagine doing anything without that being the center point of my life. We just had this January challenge. So, I started a online fitness challenge called the TRP Fitness Challenge, Tom Rowland Podcast Fitness Challenge. And it was very simple, and it doesn't have to be for January. People could try it anytime they want. It's get 20 minutes of exercise, 20 days in a row. And you could start that anytime you want. And what's interesting about this is that any kind of exercise counts. Like, you could do yoga for 20 minutes a day. You could do yoga today and walk 20 minutes tomorrow and run 20 minutes the next day, and anything, swim, anything, any kind of exercise for 20 days in a row, at least 20 minutes. And a lot of people have started doing it. I get all these posts. So that's kind of cool to hear, that people are kind of embracing that. And I think it came at a good time of the year when people are making New Year's resolutions.
Right.
But yeah, it's cool. And fishing, fishing is not considered a physical sport, but it really is. And, all you got to do is hurt yourself a little bit, like pulling the trailer off of the ball, or pushing the boat off of the trailer or something. And now you got a back injury that's going to keep you from fishing, doing the thing that you really like to do. And I don't really like to think that anything is going to be keeping me from doing the things that I really want to do. And those are fishing and being with my kids. And, if I can do 20 minutes of work a day, and that makes me, or allows me to be able to do the things that I want to do at the level that I want to do them, then it's worth it for me,
Yeah. I think as anglers, we're all kind of driven by our passion, and any amount of passion is not gonna, if you injure yourself, right, it's not gonna fix things.
Yeah, I know.
So,
but then you can just go. You can do more. You can just, if you're in better shape, you can just do more. And being in better shape, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to the gym. At all. I don't even really like gyms. I dislike gyms so much that I built one in my driveway so that I wouldn't have to go to the gym. I just think they're kind of weird. I don't know. I'd rather just walk outside. I'd rather walk on a trail than on a road. I'd rather, just be outside and do things. I'd rather swim than run on a treadmill. I like to get out and do things, and you don't have to go to a gym. You can get good enough fitness just doing basically what you normally do, except just a little more of it, or a little more intensely, like a walk. Walking is amazing. It's fantastic. And that can help to have the endurance to be able to make it through a tournament day, or stand up all day long. Or if you're a guide, have the patience. Everybody starts losing patience when you get tired. And if you're in better shape, you have more patience. And if you have more patience, you're a better guide. And if you're a better guide, you get more return business. And so it's just seems to be a one-to-one for me.
Pretty fundamental then, to have that part of your life. And, I had a personal kind of lesson here recently where I was kind of overextending myself and not getting enough sleep, not getting enough hydration. And I was doing seminars at the Nashville Boat Show, and I was working for the dealership and trying to sell pontoons and hosting a live podcast at the show. And it got to the point, and hosting out-of-town guests at my houseboat. And it got to the point where it came Saturday afternoon, my head was just not in the game, and I had to do a seminar on the hog trough. And I got up there and realized I had forgotten to get all my equipment ready.
Oh, no.
And it's the biggest audience of the entire weekend. And I'm going through it, and then I pick up my rod. I'm like, oh no, I didn't unclip my baits, because we had to take all the hooks off, so I had everything clipped. Well, I'm up there and I can't get the clip undone. And I look out and there's this huge sea of people, and I hadn't ate anything all day, hadn't really hydrated, and I'm like, I can't do this. And I got down and I did it from the floor. I couldn't do it up there, but that was a big lesson for me. You got to take care of yourself. Remember to hydrate, remember to eat, just some of the basic stuff,
Well, the sleep. I mean, you touched on sleep. I forgot to even mention sleep, but sleep is so huge. And, I was recently, doing some research on that. And, I didn't realize that Ariana Huffington that did the Huffington Post, she created that, and she's like this unbelievable dynamo. Like back in the day when she was building the Huffington Post, if you looked at that, almost every single article was written by Ariana Huffington. I mean, she was turning stuff out, and she had kind of a bad experience. She got so tired, kind of like your story there, and she ended up hurting herself. She was so tired that she basically collapsed in her office. I had never heard this story before. Maybe you know it, but she collapsed in her office and hit her face on her desk and broke her cheekbone. And since then, she's changed her whole life. She kind of realized what happened. She backed away from the Huffington Post, and she started this new company, and I wish I could remember what it's called. But if you Google Ariana Huffington Sleep, it'll come up, and I think it's called Thrive or something like that. But her whole thing now is about taking care of yourself. And so with the energy she was putting into the Huffington Post, she's now writing all these articles on sleep, on how to take care of yourself, on exercise, diet, nutrition, hydration. But really one of the key pillars of her thing is sleep. And I read this book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker that really opened my eyes to just how debilitating the lack of sleep can be. I mean, they were comparing it to being drunk. And, when you're only getting 4 or 5 hours a night versus 6 or 8 hours a night, the differences in your reactions in the way that you would drive a car, all backed by all these stats of like doctors and interns that are working at a hospital, and when they leave one of those 48-hour shifts or those big long shifts that they do, there's like a really high chance that they're going to return to the same emergency room as a patient. And I don't know. I read that book, and I really made some changes in my sleep and I need more sleep. So that's good. But that's part of being physically fit too, is making sure. And that's what Ariana Huffington is all about these days. It's like this holistic health of making sure your sleep's good, your diet's good, you're getting enough exercise, and you're maybe getting some flexibility or whatever. But that helps you no matter what. I mean, if you're a fisherman or whatever, it's going to benefit you no matter what your passion is, or no matter what your business is.
Yep. Yeah. Well, great advice and great conversation.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah. I'm honored.
Thanks for being on.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed that. And don't forget to send me an email, Angie@thewomanangler.com, if you're going to take this 20 in 20 challenge. Really, really easy to do, but I think you're going to be surprised at the results. And it's probably going to affect a whole lot more other areas of your life than you think. So I'm really excited for this. Again, let's support each other. I want to hear what your motivation is. And tune in for our next 5 Minute Friday episode. See you soon.